Recording in progress.
Sounds good. I will call the work session to order. We'll start off with just a quick roll call. McKee here. Varenkamp?
Here.
Nichols?
Here.
And I think Councilor Bottom is on his way, and Councilor Schultz won't be here tonight. So we'll get into the topic of the night, city code updates for planned unit development ordinance. And Commissioner Lanterman, you had some comments. Did you want to start it out? Perfect. He had some comments that might be helpful for the discussion.
And I appreciate you letting me take a minute of your time. Thank you, City Council. Where some see PUDs as bridging a gap between old and new code, I see it more as a hostile takeover. The PUD has forced the city to cast aside its code, its principles that the people of Corcoran value. It is a loophole that gives developers, not the people of Corcoran, the ability to shape what our city looks like and what its code will have to say. In practice, I think that the PUD has been misapplied, where almost any small good thing a developer does is considered a benefit. I did not miss that the memo for tonight listed, quote, private common places such as pools and clubhouses as a benefit to the city. This kind of analysis needs to stop. We're talking tonight about mechanisms to quantify the benefit / flexibility analysis. I don't know that any of these alternatives matter. The zoning rules will no doubt be rewritten anyway to provide exactly what the developers have asked for. Basically, small lots, big garage doors, and small setbacks are all A-OK. I fear in some respects that it's already too late, but I would ask you to carefully analyze the future changes to PUDs.
Thank you. Okay. So Natalie, did you want to do an intro here on?
Yeah, in the interest of time, because I think it's a pretty big discussion in front of us tonight, I'll just reiterate that I broke things down into 2 points: discussion of benefits and flexibilities, and then the second part, focus after we've kind of gathered on, or kind of come to an agreement on what we consider to be benefits, to be able to kind of guide what changes we should make to our PUD ordinance, and that's about it. So each slide kind of just gives a very broad summary of what's in the packet. Otherwise, it would have been several slides. So, so the next slide would be talking about benefits. And so I'll let you guys start.
Okay. So I guess we want to just, is everyone taking a look at the list and have anything major that stands out in terms of missing from it, wanting to add, or wanting to take off? And then maybe we can dive into that third question after we touch on the first two.
Is this page 2 of 11?
Yeah, that sounds
2 and
right.
3.
Yeah.
Yep, starts at page 2, yeah.
Yep, starts at page 2. The questions would be on page 5.
Yeah, it goes all the way, yes.
Yep.
So I sent a very long email to Natalie,
I did review it.
but for the sake of getting council a chance to talk about the same point. So on preservation of natural resource, I would say preservation isn't the only goal. I think enhancement might be as well. So if you've got a developer that's going to take farm field and turn it into forest, I think there's value to that. I don't know how often we're going to see that happen, but we should probably also include enhancement of natural resources that might not be there already. In the packet, it also listed a few things that I don't know belong as preservation because they're preserved by other parts of code. So wetlands, floodplains, and streams, I think typically are going to not be compromised, or at least not to a great extent because of the cost of doing so. And to Commissioner Lanterman's point, I hesitate to consider things to the developer's credit if they're kind of required or strongly encouraged by economics to do it anyway. So I would probably encourage us to remove some of those things that are more or less required. from what we consider preservation of natural resources.
Makes sense.
Yeah, if we can just take these one thing at a time.
Sure.
Wetlands are already done. That's not in my mind, that's done. The streams, I'm living next to somebody that's revamping the ditch, that we call it, but it's a stream and nothing's happening to that person. And no developments out there because I'm in the rural side. But being on the planning commission and then now here, I think going forward, we can be more to code than to PUD. In my mind, a PUD needs to come out and really show a lot. I don't know what those benefits are, but on the natural resources, a wetland, a stream, trees, all of those things, while they're all great things to have and stuff, is there a way to do it and limit the amount of density that we'll give into, if that makes sense? You know, where our low density is 3 to 5 units per acre, everybody keeps pushing the 5. Is there a way we can do something that's a credit, but stop pushing the density up to the 5 side? I know we've had conversations about the density changing to 2, 2.5 to 3.5 or something like that, and that's a whole nother conversation. But the preservation of natural resources, I think a lot of it's already done, and we don't have to do anything to that. So it's in my mind, the more I talk about it, it's not a benefit to the PUD, it's already commanded, so to speak.
Mr. Mayor, if I could real quick, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Under a straight plat, we could potentially see situations where they don't need to preserve the trees because we don't have a tree preservation ordinance and
True.
we keep deciding not to even look at one. And that's fine, but this would be a way to negotiate it. As far as wetlands, again, I understand what you're saying, but under a straight plat, they could easily show that they need to be able to fill it in because they can't work around it. And so they would be, if it's not a DNR protected wetland, they would be able to go through a mitigation process to fill it in. There are also situations where we've seen people,
On the wetland, Natalie, I don't want to interrupt, but on the wetland, in the stuff that I'm experiencing out there, they're identifying future wetlands right now. So when the application goes in front of the watershed district or these things, they don't have any bite into saying, no, that is a wetland, you can't fill it in. I mean, I'm experiencing all kinds of goofy things, and I'll try not to delay things tonight in our meeting, but they're already identifying wetlands that aren't even wetlands. They're just tiled right now and those kind of things. So they don't, the Rush Creek watershed, the wetland preservation of the natural resource side that reviews these plats don't have anything to say about something that might not already be.
so
Or a
they, you
future
have to go
wetland?
through a process, and Kevin might be able to speak to it first, but just to finish my train of thought real
Yeah,
quick too.
I'm
We
sorry.
we have had situations where people have purchased property and have set a large side away to turn it into a wetland bank. And then they were looking, so there might be situations where, again, we're enhancing it. So we can make it clear that wetlands preservation or enhancement above and beyond what would be possible otherwise. We're not looking to credit something that would, like if it's a DNR protected wetland, that doesn't make sense, that's not a benefit because there's no way they can touch that. But there are situations where they would be able to fill it in and they may be trying to work around that. But as far as what kind of review process that is, I think Kevin could talk
Yeah,
about
just,
that.
I think echoing both those comments, what wetlands would fall under enhancement only, not preservation. So just to leave that there, I think everyone touched on that, but in real simple terms, it really only applies for enhancement.
So if I could take one more minute, the right Hennepin location, there is a identified possible wetland,
Nope, there's a wetland there.
but
Let's not get
In a-
on, I don't want, let's
in a-
not take
in a-
our time to go over your
I'm
individual
sorry, no,
circumstance hearing.
in a current state though, I'm gonna get off my comments, but on that, where the farmer is plowing it, there's no bulrush, there's no nothing there, and it's identified as a wetland?
There's 8 different type of wetlands, and there's 3 criteria that define a wetland, and I can get you that, but an example, that would be soil characteristics, right? So if you dig up the soil and you find that water is present within 6 inches, there's chemical properties
Okay.
in like red soil that's present, that's one of them. Vegetation's another criteria, and then there's some other more specific, I can't think of right now, but if you
Yeah.
meet those 3 criteria, it triggers it. So, and that's a low-grade wetland, right? One that's been farmed, one that's there. It's a formally delineated wetland, but it can be mitigated, right? It's a low-quality wetland. They can go through the process, pay 2-to-1 credits to mitigate it, and have a healthier habitat somewhere else. So they're allowed to mitigate that. If it was a DNR high-quality wetland, you would be forced to work around it. That would not really be a viable site. So in that specific scenario, because it is a delineated wetland, and in the Wetland Conservation Act applies to impacts to the wetland. So you can have a wetland and you could farm through it, and there's really no purpose as long as you're not filling that wetland. That's where the concern is. That's the rule. So ag is really kind of a separate than land development, right? Because you're
All right.
impacting the wetland. So it's super convoluted, but that's how that can happen and still be farmed.
I think the question might be more, how often do we think we'll see that versus, there's still a cost to the one, if there's a wetland that they could work around, there's still a cost to that. So how often do we think we'll see that come into play, where if we think it'd be very commonplace if we didn't put any emphasis on it, maybe we should have it as a listed benefit. If not, then we shouldn't. Or maybe if this is kind of skipping ahead, do something like the point system, maybe it's a matter of just trying to weigh that appropriately for how important we think that is
I
versus how
think
much we'll
it
see it.
counts, but it's really low on the.
Right, yep, something like that.
That makes sense to me, yeah. It seems like it's unlikely, given the 2-to-1 factor, and my understanding is the credits are fairly expensive. It's usually not economical.
$144,000 an acre.
That's all.
That adds a lot to the price of a parcel, if you're gonna fill in a third of it. I mean, you might do it a little bit here or there, but
Yeah.
I would think it would apply like along natural corridors, right? Like along your premier corridors, if the development abutted it, you
That-
might be able to encourage some of that.
That all is codified in the watersheds anyways.
If it's not high quality, they can go through a mitigation process, is what we're trying to say.
Or I'm saying
Yeah.
they would maybe broaden it out and make it wider or shape their grading plan to create more habitat. I mean, I think it along high-quality features is where, again, it's your call, but where I see it more value. If it's a farm field, creating a wetland in the middle of it, they're probably not even gonna really look at, in my opinion. But, I mean, just my perspective is, to me, it's like in natural corridors or planned natural corridors where that might be considered a benefit from my perspective. But it's certainly an enhancement. The preservation part, I personally wouldn't get, because they have to do that anyways. So it's the enhancement component of wetlands that would be my,
Well, they could fill it in and buy credits from
depends on what it
someone
is. Yeah,
in a different part of the county too.
correct.
All we'd have to do is say you can't mitigate wetlands. As a part of, all you'd have to do is codify it. It's just a matter of whether you assign it points or decide you can't fill in wetlands to build housing.
I would, yeah, if we were gonna go that route, I would do some extra research, but, probably some things we can do in terms of policy and how we do that might be applicable. We are the LGU, we're bound by the rules, but there might be some policy that we can implement. But there's certain things we couldn't do, but there might be some flexibility in some.
Well, the city couldn't make those rules looser. We could tighten them.
Right.
Yeah. Do you have other stuff?
if we go on to the next one.
Right.
So for site amenities,
On preservation or total, John?
No, I was just gonna go through mine.
oh, go ahead, yeah, take a turn.
Talking and it.
Go.
Go for it.
You were what?
I'm stuck on that natural
Oh,
resource stuff.
okay.
I thought there was more limitations
So for-
by governing bodies than there is, so thank you for the comments. Very
So,
much.
so for me, the reason why I think some of our PUDs have been not as high quality is because the code isn't really high quality. So the backdrop of a non-PUD is just a regular old code. By code, they really don't have to apply, they're granted status. So the PUD kind of competes with the regular code. And so as I look through these, we could, if we tighten up the code, then the PUDs all of a sudden become,
Like tighten up our other zoning districts, you mean?
it just tighten up some of the, so rather than choices, must have, or codifying what happens with steep slopes, codifying what happens with trees, codifying what happens with groundwater or preservation of natural resources, codifying how many different, and this is kind of the whole swath of them. I starred my favorite ones and X'd off the stuff that I didn't vote for. And for me, some of the things that are in existing, like there's a guiding principle for code in our 2040 plan on page 9. It's page 2 of 11 in our packet. Like, I like the ones that actually talk about housing, protection of the natural resources, and rural residential development that preserves efficient resources and urbanization. But there's a bunch of these in here that are like social guides and goals. And I think the thing that irks us a lot is not necessarily the social guides and goals, like the creation of opportunities for a thriving town center with a range of retail, office, residential, and gathering spaces. Like, that is never something that, I actually wouldn't even have it in here. I wouldn't have land use opportunities to expand and to diversify the city's tax base by encouraging new commercial development. I wouldn't do that. That'll not happen naturally. High-end and all this professional services, that'll happen naturally. I wouldn't, some of the things in here like expansion of residential options to achieve life cycle housing, I wouldn't have that in there. That'll either happen naturally or I guess it's none of my business what kind of housing people put in here, so long as it
Right, yeah, I don't think we're
stays
getting,
in code.
right,
I think we could simplify the code and actually make by code the landscapes and the neighborhoods more interesting. And then if somebody did do a PUD, it'd have to be incredible, or we just wouldn't have any expansion of the housing in our town. Which I think all of us are up here kind of saying we don't want the same kind of neighborhoods over and over and over
right.
in our town. And instead of using the PUD process to ask for stuff because someone wants to do a little bit, you could just put it in code that you want all these things. And then we don't have to worry about, us saying, oh, you're gonna, I'm not a big fan of the tree preservation stuff, but in theory, if you said, if in a PUD right now, somebody could come in and say, well, we won't cut all the trees, but in exchange for that, we want 25-foot lots. And that's sort of what happens sometimes. And if we actually said, well, you can't cut the trees anyways,
Right.
then it would,
Makes
the
sense.
give and take wouldn't be so like, you're actually not giving anything.
Right.
It's in the code.
Yep.
So, like, there are several of here, like, mix of housing types with a variety of lot licenses at different pricing points. Like, I wouldn't have that in there. I think what we're after, my opinion is what we're after is a different looking thing, and, or different looking neighborhoods that, create continuity with the existing natural features of Corcoran. And this meeting could be 3 hours long, I feel like.
For sure.
because I did what you did, and I X'd a bunch of stuff and said yes to a bunch of stuff. And I do feel like if we tighten the code, simplify it to a certain degree, get rid of some of the social engineering, we're gonna end up with really awesome neighborhoods, rather than what we have now, which is exactly the same as every other neighborhood in Maple Grove and even the eastern part of Corcoran. And I looked at this, at the point system in Maple Grove, and I thought it was okay, but instead of points, so some of the things, instead of the points just having them must have, so you don't get 5 points,
You just have.
you just have to have it.
Yeah.
And I kind of would, no one ever agrees with me on this, but I would like to have something that requires something rural in your
Yeah,
neighborhood.
And there was something, well, I don't know if it was one of the
Focal
scoring
points?
criteria in the
Focal
Maple
points,
Grove one.
yeah. And so so one of the good things about Corcoran is we are not bound by existing agreements with the Met Council or Hennepin County for certain types of housing in our town. So like Maple Grove, because they get money for intersections and money for paving and money for this and money for that and bus routes and different things.
They got quotas to meet.
They're beholden to a lot of things, like social mandates, like affordability and elder care and all these things, and we are not beholden to that, thankfully, because we've mound our budget and we don't rely on anything else. So I feel like and think that we could adapt a lot of these ideas, codify them, and basically say, if you don't do these things, don't even bother submitting an application.
Yeah.
I agree with a lot of what you said. I have one concern. I like the idea of having a stricter overall code as a way to cut off some of the low-hanging fruit that often gets offered. But that only works if we're willing to close the relief valve on the PUD altogether when it's appropriate to do so. And to me, that argues for the supermajority approval requirement, that you would want to get a 2/3 or a 4/5, to make sure that if we say we want something in code and the PUD allows the flexibility to circumvent code, what's to say that we're actually going to stick to the higher standards we're trying to enact?
Yeah, didn't we talk about this 2 weeks ago, where I was in favor of having a four-fifth budget on, I mean, it would make sense to have it on any PUD, a 4/5 vote.
I would support that.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Did you have some other items, Jeremy? I know you said you were.
Yeah, there's
a lot of them.
There's a ton. And I feel like I don't want to get us too far into the weeds. I have some of the same concerns that John did around asking for things in the point system or in code that we don't necessarily care for. Like, I don't think there's a need to incentivize retirement communities, given that we're seeing a lot of that kind of housing come into Corcoran anyway. So, and I spelled all of that in detail out in my email to Natalie. Maybe we can go through like some kind of an email survey from Natalie to us, and we can give more efficient feedback as to what things we see as benefit, what things we want to leave out, what things we're kind of on the fence about. That might be more efficient than trying to talk through all of them. I liked the idea of a rating system in the PUD that helps us understand how much is actually being offered. But I would like to follow a path where there's still discretion as to whether it gets approved. And it seemed like the draft that was provided from Maple Grove had that, where there was a threshold for it to even go to council. And when you go to council, there's not a guarantee that even if you're above that threshold, that it would be approved.
Right.
But it helps staff have an ability to negotiate intelligently and have some leverage in the early stages when those concepts are being put together. And by the time it gets to us, then there would be hopefully some more give and take, and we would end up with something of higher quality.
Yeah, I think it's seeming like there's maybe the solution we're going towards is some specific areas that we make it stricter language and some potentially a point system or something like that for some of the more preference stuff. And we'd have to, that's where it would take a while to figure out exactly what those preferences are. We have kind of a template for Maple Grove, but obviously ours would be different. And
I think it's funny that everybody says we don't want neighborhoods like Maple Grove, but then
Yeah.
we throw a template of Maple Grove into our,
right.
and that's not on you, it's
Well,
just kind of funny.
I'm not saying we use their criteria, it was more of just, it was an interesting
system.
system, I haven't seen it.
It is a very, I'm totally joking.
No, but no, I do hear it, and I was like, oh no. But my intention was never to say, let's just copy this, it was just, here's an idea, we could, once we have an idea of what it is we're looking for, we can kind of lay out.
Yeah.
Dayton was another example I provided, I just didn't provide their code.
Yeah, I'm not saying that you did say that. I just think it's funny, like, it's just interesting because everybody says not like Maple Grove. Where'd the clock go anyways?
It's a little screwed up.
Off,
It's
Oh, okay.
being
few minutes off.
kind of long
We've still got an hour and 4 minutes.
Yeah.
at a time.
One thing I noted, there's a saying that generals are always fighting the last war. And we've had a lot of residential development, so I think we're kind of focused on that. But we should keep in mind that with the Northeast District, there's a lot of mixed use that's going to come in, potentially with PUD also. So I think we also need to keep in mind how we would want to give the city leverage in negotiating those kinds of agreements as well. And the amenities that we've talked about so far in terms of preservation of natural resources, I think make a lot of sense in a residential environment, but may not make as much sense in a commercial area. And so we might want to think about, are there things that we want to note in the PUD code or just in direction to staff that we would value in like a downtown environment?
It's a good point. Well, I almost think that talking about this part of town area, that's going to be a whole different thing than maybe some of the stuff in the northeast that's going to develop into commercial and certainly industrial. We're not, I don't think, going to have the same interest or the same importance of some of that preservation in an industrial park as we would in a neighborhood.
And we have 2 industrial PUDs coming in the fall, so.
Right. And that's one of the later questions, I think, of do we have a different set of standards amongst commercial, industrial PUDs as well as,
Yeah, types of PUDs.
yeah,
Yeah, so the idea being we could kind of carve out where we think certain types of PUDs would be appropriate. So maybe in our low-density residential, for example, we only want to see single-use or cluster PUDs. We don't want to see anything that's going to mix uses. We could limit it to just single-family or twin homes. The townhomes would not be something that we want to see without a 4/5 vote, you know. And then also kind of have a different standard for other land uses, so industrial PUDs would be something we could call out. So it was just kind of clarifying what we'd want to see in each district. We don't want to see a mixed-use PUD in our low-density residentials. And we can kind of make that very clear in our code, and then that, just that standard alone would, I think, help clear up some things. I think in our, you know, are we okay with mixed use in our mixed residential zones, or do we just want to see residential type development there? And that may have provided more guidance to Cook Lake when they came in. So things like that. So just kind of, again, clarifying what it is that, or what districts are we less flexible in versus others. So.
One shortcoming I see in the existing applications that come in is they seem to treat any mixture of multiple things as an inherent advantage, because one of the intents of the PUD ordinance is to provide more efficient use of land than would otherwise be provided. So I think we should remove the idea that mixing is inherently good of different uses within the code. I would be open, I think, to a residential-looking set of, commercial offices in a mixed-use residential area. But I probably wouldn't want to see, strip malls or neighborhood commercial necessarily.
For sure. Yeah, I think there are certain things that I would be more open to PUD in general. Some of the mixed use stuff seems to make more sense to me than I think I would be open to some of the more drastic changes in particularly low density residential, but I think really any of the strictly residential zones. Mixed use seems to be more closely aligned to the purpose of what, or one of the purposes of a PUD, which, the mixing there.
I would probably see the most flexibility being appropriate for the mixed use and the downtown mixed use areas.
I would think so. Trying to think of some of the, do we have any commercial PUDs that are
I don't think I've really seen a commercial PUD. I did have a sketch plan come in, but he may be able to do it under a straight plat. But it's real rough at this
Gotcha.
point. So it's potential that could come in as a PUD if he can't. But yeah, it would be in our community commercial. And technically, all the uses he is proposing are allowed in the underlying district, even though there is a housing component, but they're allowed under a CUP.
okay?
So yeah, I have not seen a commercial PUD at this point.
Gotcha.
But yeah, both of the industrial parks they're having to do it under that PUD.
In the, we don't have to get into all the details of each one, but generally, what are the flexibilities that are causing it to go PUD for those?
Setbacks.
Okay.
And then there's like some pretty big constraints to a property, such as like an underground pipe that they cannot move. And so not only do they have the setback, but they can't build on top of that. And so then it's things like they need more flexibility with their interior setbacks on the site, because they've lost a significant amount of land right there. So that's one in particular that's coming in.
Something like that makes sense, though,
Yeah,
in my mind.
I agree.
I mean, that makes sense.
It's industrial in an industrial
Yeah.
zone.
But to
Right,
do mixed residential where we've had a whole bunch of assorted things happen so far, is that set precedence that we can't say no to some of those things
You
now?
definitely can say no. You
Thank
can always say no. You do not have to approve a PUD you do not like. It is completely under your legislative authority as the council. You are not subject to approving something because something got previously approved in the past. As long as you can have a clear findings that
Yeah.
it does not meet this standard. It does not. So you do not, you just want to make sure the explanation's clear as to why you're denying it, but you're not required to approve something because
Because of
previous council approved
what
something.
we've done. I don't want to say
Yeah.
previous council, we all own it. It's all
Well,
ours,
but
no matter what's happened in the past. I
Fair
just,
enough.
everything that's coming now is new.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
we can say no, and we don't
You can say no.
have to do some of
You
the
can
stuff.
do that with
we've done.
variances as well. Just because we approve something in the past doesn't mean that we're subject to having to approve it in the future, simply because we can say as a city, we learned from our mistake.
Yeah.
That was not a good
Thank
idea
you.
to grant that variance, and we're not gonna do it again. So again, it's just having a clear record of findings.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say, knowing some of the controversy that we've had very recently.
Yeah.
When I talk to developers coming in who may be looking at a PUD in a low density, I'm like, they do not like townhomes. Do not propose townhomes. So I'm trying to kind of prevent that from even getting to you. I can't do that perfectly if they're going to be stubborn about it. But if you guys don't want townhomes in a low density zone, you do not have to approve townhomes.
are you able to say, you can give us that, but I'd have another plan in your,
So it's
In
really
your back
expensive
pocket.
to draw up those plans, so I think that's why, but, I mean, sometimes I've even said like, okay, if you're saying this is a benefit, it'd be really helpful to show the council,
yeah, what is it?
like, why is this a benefit? Because if we do the straight plat, this is what would happen, but they don't wanna spend the money on that.
Yeah.
But that
I
is
know.
something I've tried to ask for in the past, especially, I don't want to call out names, especially when a very recent one came in, I was like, can they draw something up to show why preservate or enhancement of the wetlands is a benefit? Because if they come in under a straight plat, how much we would be losing.
Yeah.
So it's just, there are financial constraints, and the PUD process is already very expensive. It's twice the cost of a regular plat. So I think that's why they don't necessarily have a backup plan ready to go. But like I said, especially when someone comes into me at the very beginning stages where they don't even have a concept plan, they just have a parcel that they're looking at, that I very clear, like, okay, these are what we've run into. These have been the sticking points most recently, so this would be how to avoid it. And they do seem to be listening.
Yeah, I think at the sketch plan, that if there's something that they want to do that we don't, based on your recent feedback, we would say, come in with a sketch plan and read the room. We would all need to understand what would be acceptable to.
That's worked
to
the
you.
last couple that we've had.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, we've had a couple of conversations, one with an automobile
Yeah. So
repair place, and
Yeah.
then I'm trying to remember the other one.
The S&P that we recently talked
Yeah,
about, yeah. I mean, I just went out to the site. I mean, that's not a PUD, but I just went out to the site yesterday. I think we've reached a compromise that neither one of us is happy with, so you know it's a good compromise.
Okay,
Not necessarily.
Well, yeah,
You end up with half bridges.
yeah, fair enough. But I do think that, but they do listen to you. I think, don't be afraid to say when you absolutely do not like an idea, and it's okay at that point to be like, this is not something I can see myself voting for. That's what they're asking you for. You're not committing to,
Yeah.
because you're not committing to anything. It's like non-binding feedback.
Advisory.
But it is okay to say that you don't like this project.
Can I ask a question and make a suggestion? I wish we had people that would come in here way earlier than they do. Like, I wish they would come in here with ideas and concepts and even napkin ideas and say, we're thinking of doing this. Before they spend a bunch of time and effort and energy on a project, it kind of bugs me that they don't ask us, have a conversation with us first before they start even thinking about.
There is one thing that it doesn't fully address that problem, but I think it might help is, and I think I mentioned this at a previous one, I don't know if it's Dayton or someone had.
And you guys don't have to read us. We can just give up our thoughts,
How is that different than the sketch plan process, though? Because that usually is pretty
I think
broad.
he's saying it'd like it to be earlier than, when we're-
earlier than even sketch plan, because they've got,
The issue with them bringing in a plan that
Yeah.
hasn't been vetted. So the sketch plan allows me to vet, to be able to critically analyze and be like, these are the problems, these are the questions. If they just come in with a napkin idea, it might be really great, but then by the time I sit down on it, it's not going to.
oh, okay. So we had a project come in here maybe 5 or 6 years ago. They got positive feedback, and then they started sitting down with staff, and they're like, none of this is gonna fly. And then they went and said, well, this council loved it.
Right.
But we didn't know that none of the stuff was within code.
Exactly.
And that's where we really.
I see,
want
okay,
to
so
do
that kind of
So
makes
that's why the
sense.
sketch plan, and I am pushing everyone to do a sketch plan these days. Like, do a sketch plan, ask these questions, this will be part of the questions that we can bring up. But even when I have a sit-down with, an hour sit-down with a developer, and I'm taking a quick look at it, it might even look great in that hour. By the time I have time to spend, 10 hours on it and really dig into it, there's several things wrong with it that I couldn't catch just looking at it in a few minutes to be able to give them some general feedback.
even,
Did they put earnest money aside to have your time be
For
spent
the
with them?
Yeah, there is a
plan.
sketch plan. It's the cheapest application process that we have besides
Sorry, okay. You don't need to go
some other
into,
things. But yeah, It is definitely the quickest, it's the quickest application process. We get it to you within 30 days, once we have everything we need to review. And does save them $10,000 or so if you guys aren't gonna go for it.
Right.
And the
So,
level of information we require on that is a lot less.
it is a lot
So,
less,
Right.
yeah.
That's the other challenge where we might not catch something right away is because it's not all there in front of you and just when you overlap stuff, it happens.
I don't know if it's Dayton or Rogers, but one of them, I think, does sketch plans go to planning commission first and then to council at the end of the month, or probably not the next meeting, but the following meeting.
And we
That would
have-
definitely add time.
We have talked to it, it would add time to the process. Some of the reasons we haven't done that in the past, I think we actually might have had that at one point and got rid of it, is because giving feedback from the planning commission, they're just advisory.
Mhm.
You, as the policymakers, might have different.
They would get distracted by their own personal preferences on stuff that really
Yeah.
was beyond the scope of what a planning commission was supposed to do, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, because again, PUDs are legislative, so it really plays to your legislative authority. It's a bit different than the planning commission's role.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a way that,
So some of the
try to
questions
get them
they're
in a
asking
little
is-
earlier.
I know.
You could maybe see if the chair, who might have more experience,
We don't
could
have a
weigh
chair.
in
We
as
don't-
part of
Yeah.
the,
At this
Right now,
point,
there
we
isn't
do
one.
not have
Oh,
a
yeah.
chair, very much
systematically, we have a chair. But during the sketch plan, maybe we ask the chair to come to the council meeting or be the liaison in those sessions, and they can give feedback at that point.
It's not a bad idea in and of itself. I don't know if that addresses the getting it in sooner part, but.
No, but you get a broader set of
Yeah.
feedback to the developer.
Yep. For sure. Okay, so I'm trying to go back to some of the questions that we had laid out for us from staff. Kind of John and Jeremy, I think all of us are generally in agreement that there may be some standards that we want to just codify and take out of the equation.
I'd rather they be in the ordinance. I mean,
Yeah.
whatever, instead of the PUD, just solidify it like John, both of you guys have said. It just, that may or may not make Natalie's life easier and then staff's life easier at that concept plan and stuff. The PUD should be, in my mind, something extremely extraordinary as far as what's done. I can't put my hands around that extraordinary side, but no, if you want to do this, it's a PUD, and then we've got to go down that rabbit hole.
Right.
I'd much rather say, here's our ordinances, these are the things you're going to be missing, and it's going to be, I think we've said plenty to you guys saying what we don't like. I don't want to take away from current neighborhoods that are in process towards the end, everything that's been approved so far. Have I agreed with any of them? No. But they're pretty okay when they're finally done. It's just all of the stuff we gotta go to get them to completion. It'd be nice if we didn't have a lot of those issues that we have. I'd love to see wider streets for public works. I'd love to see, boulevard trees, all of these things. It was hard to drive past, the new development that's going in, Applewood and all that stuff, and the pines along the 10 and stuff like that. I still think they could have saved some of those things, and they're gone. I mean, we get the little chunk of woods in the back corner and stuff, but it's all just gone. And it would be nice. I mean, everybody talks about our 700-plus page ordinances and stuff like that. It'd be nice to change some wording on some of our current ordinances and remove pages from our PUD and truly make PUD extraordinary. I mean, extraordinary, I shouldn't say extraordinary.
But then I think we need to deal with the density level being higher than
Yeah.
our level of wetland will allow.
Yeah.
Which I'm fine with doing, but I think it's a crawl, walk, run scenario. Let's
And you
stop it
guys,
bleeding
you
first.
guys have talked too about some people don't want the bigger yards and those kind of things. They want homeowners associations, they don't wanna shovel their own sidewalks, driveway, and mow the least amount of yard possible. Is there another residential zone that we can define that in?
Like the lazy man zone?
Yeah.
That's the
No yard.
residential area.
What?
That's the mixed-use residential area.
But then
That's
I don't want the addition of a townhouse grouping in something like that, mixed-use residential. I'd keep it
So that's what they're zoned
single-family
for, though.
homes.
I mean-
I know.
So some of those questions get
It's so
into,
complicated.
it'd be trying to figure out what we'd want, what the, what's the word I'm looking for? Restrictions would be that make a PUD, you know, less common, more extraordinary, like you said, it's not happening all the time. What are the boundaries that we're determining makes it rare? Is it the size, is it limiting the size of the lots that, or the projects that could be a PUD? Is it being more strict with some of the, you know, protecting natural resources, keeping the trees? If they're gonna cut down a bunch of trees, they can't do the PUD. Is it,
Well, if you make the code better and have a higher standard in the code, then the PUDs are gonna be also better, because they don't have the fallback position of, well, we'll just do the code.
right?
Because like if
Yeah.
the fallback position on Highlands or whatever, and the fallback position on the brand-new Pulte development was, well, fine, we'll just go with the code and it's gonna be all townhouses.
Right.
And we'll meet the density requirement, it'll be a
Or
crap
They
neighborhood.
couldn't do.
They couldn't do
townhouses.
townhouses.
And they
Nope.
couldn't do twins either, by code.
But to me, well, remember we had conflicting, you know, the density requirements could only be met with townhouses because they couldn't, it was that was a PUD. 'cause
Sorry,
it
which one are
was-
you talking about? Cook Lake or?
Well, Cook Lake and also
Okay.
the new one where they actually couldn't meet the code and the defined neighborhood either. They couldn't meet the zone and the code.
I think
It was
the-
impossible. They had to go
I think
PUD.
the tricky thing there, without getting too much into the weeds of past projects, is trying to direct them somewhere in the middle of, you know, what's ended up being proposed several times or approved at some points, and what the code, there's a lot of middle ground there, and how do we try to steer them towards something more in the middle?
Yeah, I think if the codes are tighter and better, and it's a 4/5 on a PUD,
Yeah.
then you're gonna see a lot better projects
Yeah.
go through here.
But what you'll probably see too, though, is they'll claim, and they already claim this, that code isn't possible if the code requirements go up.
We'll just have to figure it out and make sure it's possible. Isn't politics the art of the possible?
Not to derail anything, but how did they build the stuff south of Hackamore, west of 116 in those woods?
More west.
The Snyder neighborhood you're talking about?
I'm talking non-Corcoran, south of Hackamore,
So in Corcoran?
No.
Not in
The
Corcoran.
neighborhood of Medina.
Fox Run,
Oh,
whatever
Foxbury.
it's done, Foxbury. How did that happen? Is it just timing, anything like that?
I think it was
Is there any way we could ever see something like that in our city?
I can't
In
say
some of the
never.
wooded areas and stuff.
I can't say never. I don't know enough about those approvals. I could look into it to see what it is, but I would I believe if Kendra was here, I know she knows a bit more about it, but.
In my previous experience in Maple Grove, we had, if you take Dunkirk north and it turns, or Longtail turns into Dunkirk, there's that oak tree in the middle of the sidewalk. That developer said, nope, that's gotta come down, and the city and everybody said, nope, it's gonna stay, and that oak is thriving. We had the one on Bass Lake Road on Gleason Farms, it's up on the hill. They cut around it, they put rocks in, and 30 years later, the tree finally succumbed to the fact that it was old and those kind of things, and it fell down. To see some of this stuff change and happen, even with the new, or the neighborhood, Trevera, whatever we call it, that whole ridge of trees, everything is saved, but then everything else was cleared away from that ridge and stuff. That'll be backyards, it should be wonderful, but again, tight streets, crazy setbacks and those kind of things. I'd love to see a farm field
Fox
built.
Hollow is no different than,
Foxbury
Farms is
what
no
I'm calling
different than Jeremy's neighborhood, in my opinion.
They have mature trees.
Yeah, but you'll have mature trees in 20
If
years.
we wait 30 years, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's some.
When you look at everything that's happened in Maple Grove, a lot of those clear cut, all of those
Yeah.
things, they've grown and they're beautiful now. What I'm saying is, if I use the example of what's up by Bellwether, I really thought that clear cut that happened, they leave some of the trees on, they gotta know where the houses are going, they gotta know where the roads are going. And instead, they just clear cut everything up to the wetlands or the woods and didn't leave any of the mature trees. I'd love to see something where they
So
could work around some of that
is the
stuff.
best way to implement that some sort of point system and weighing that very heavily?
I don't know, because every time we talk about a tree preservation or a tree point stuff.
Right.
Well, you could,
they
on the
just
other
don't want
end,
any part of it.
you could require certain amounts of trees to be planted in the neighborhood too. Whether the,
Instead of one in the front yard, something more.
whatever. I
Yeah,
mean, a lot of the trees that we see cut down are like ash trees and box elder.
Well,
And like that kind of
I've
stuff.
stated I'm not a favor of that. I've seen some decent mature trees.
As far as
They're gone.
you get in, for me, you get into problems with, I own my property,
Yeah.
I own my trees. So you don't get a say as to whether I cut them down or not. But you
I'm
could
not-
on the
but
other
I'm not
end,
saying you, I'm saying if a developer were to come and buy your
Right.
property.
they also own the trees.
How could you say to the developer that's buying your property, how could we say as a city, could you do something that would preserve some of the, I'm not
Yeah.
telling them what to do with their property, I'm just saying, is there a way
Yeah.
that
Well,
could
we
be
can-
done?
But you could have a number assigned to new trees
Yeah.
or old trees.
So, well, and I think that's kind of where a point system might be beneficial in terms of, I mean, there's 2 points, 2 questions I feel like I'm answering, but point system might be beneficial in that planting new trees might also get you points when you can't save trees. But in terms of like high-quality trees that we have identified, if I'm talking to someone, I always point those out and be like, this would go a long way in getting approval. We want to keep those.
Yeah.
So I do say that already, but we could put a point system or codify, we can do a couple different things to get that. But yes, I think that's something we can fix with our PUD process. And it is something I'm already implementing without it being in code. But if we want to have a standard in terms of when does this get brought to council, when does council approve something, we want to have a strict standard, then we can look at that.
There is value to in increasing the minimum level, I think, for planting. I would love to see an incentive for, 50% shade coverage at, year X, based on how they set up their landscaping plan, just because it saves, it could incentivize saving trees, because you can leverage things that are already big. It'll save energy, it'll save on stormwater fees, because it slows down the rainfall. I mean, there's so many benefits to a more forested neighborhood.
Requirement, yeah.
Yeah, that actually might, I like that because maybe you're looking at, okay, we plant 500 new trees or we keep, 50 of these old, beautiful, big trees, and then we're gonna have less new trees that we're gonna have to plant because we're getting to that coverage amount or the shade percentage, whatever we said. I like that.
And I might be asking too much. It's
No, I think-
beyond the point of building homes amongst the woods instead of, let's clear the blessed things, put new homes and reforest it, and it'll look pretty in 50 years.
And that is my concern. And again, we can look at underlying districts.
Yep.
That is a much bigger project, and I can't promise that we can get that done by
Yeah.
this year. Addressing our PUD is still a huge undertaking, as I think you all see with how
Yep.
big this packet was and how we've barely gotten through the first
Yeah.
slide. But it is something that I think we could reasonably do by December. and get implemented for 2023. And I've lost my train of thought, but as far as underlying districts, if we have someone come in with a straight plat with our current, or since we don't have a tree preservation ordinance and we really don't want one, is what I keep hearing, all those trees can go. It doesn't, so it's something so if we want something that has woods or a canopy feature, right now our PUD would be the strongest tool for that.
Maybe we should move into a speed round.
Yeah, I'm wondering that.
So maybe we can, let's see if we can agree on things that we find valuable, maybe to start with. So I'm going to list things that I had on my favor list from the point system. And
Why
if
don't you just
anybody
read 'em?
disagrees, that's what I'm going to do.
Okay,
If anybody disagrees, let's talk about it.
okay.
Go for it.
So first one, placement of uses so as to integrate with adjacent uses.
Dude,
Next one, appropriately located neighborhood scale, commercial or office uses.
Where are you getting this from?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
This is from the Maple Grove Code.
Okay, fair
These are-
enough.
These are the ones
Yeah,
from their
okay.
point system that I thought should be worth points for us.
Okay,
2A1, percent of units within a quarter mile of an identifiable neighborhood focal point, which could be a silo.
I very much like that one.
has to be a silo.
2A2, distribution of attached units, that attached units are are integrated throughout the neighborhood, not just chunked off in a corner if there's going to be a mix.
Wait, okay,
That would be for more higher density
Right.
PUDs, yeah.
2A3, creating open space using multi-story buildings.
since you're just reading them off, can we make comments?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
that's the point.
So, 1A2, placement, so to integrate, you said yes. And I question the need for private park. I guess I'm not sure about that. I don't think they should get points for,
So just the argument for it, and you don't need to agree, but the argument for it is it's private park may be beneficial in that we don't have to upkeep it, and those residents are probably more likely to use that, so it's just less use of our other facilities. So that would be the
Okay.
argument for it, but you can definitely disagree.
well, they just wouldn't get points for it.
Fair enough.
Collaboration, I think, is a must. I don't think you should get extra points for doing what you probably should do. I think I'm caught up to you, Jeremy.
Cool. 2A6, visual termini. Two B1, square foot range between largest and smallest unit.
It's, in this specific example, seems to be too heavily weighted, probably.
Yeah, I would agree.
I don't know that I'm inherently against it being a
I think
criteria.
just rather than having an affordability score, promoting different sizes is a better way, I think, to target that.
I agree.
I think a different look.
Yeah,
So,
I think it's
I
kind of the
don't-
next stuff of the styles.
Yeah, like, I don't necessarily,
Yeah, I think 2B2 and 2B3 should be code requirements.
yes. That's what I put as can we require.
I'd agree.
I'm sorry, I don't have it, what,
So that's the 3+ styles of attached and the 6+ styles of detached. 2B2 and 2B3.
and you want, so you don't want this in the PUD, you want this for a later code requirement, or we want this in the PUD ordinance?
Or you have it as a requirement in the PUD ordinance if you're submitting a residential.
Okay, so we like it, but it's a requirement, gotcha.
Yeah, you don't
Yeah.
have a choice as to make
Right,
the
so
house.
that's some of the ways where we're tightening up
Yeah,
how they get there.
agreed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that,
It was 2 and 3, right, Jeremy?
2 and 3.
2B2 and 2.
Yep.
3, requirement, okay, thank you.
Then I had 2C2, exceptional landscaping to buffer homes from arterial and major collector roads. I'm guessing this is why you see so many fences along major roads in Maple Grove?
I just have it circled with a bunch of stars and yes.
Yeah.
yeah, I put this is huge.
Yep.
Okay, so lots of points.
Huge. Quantify,
I like them,
5
but
points per person.
they gotta be maintained.
Yeah, they do get old if
They
they're cedar. and it
gotta
can
be maintained.
Are the setbacks in Maple Grove the same that we have for fencing?
No, they have a complete, I don't even want to get into that.
Those fences look
The
terrible.
location of those fences.
Well, the ones
Really?
that are,
They
the ones that are
Especially-
vinyl are better, I think, than the ones that are
Well,
wood that
not
have been
yet.
left to
Maybe
rot
just
in
like-
place.
Yeah, and they're all different.
Yeah, the HOA should probably be responsible for maintaining that stuff
Would
once it
think.
goes up.
And that buffer, that fence, I haven't seen a broken one look good, if you know what I mean. 4 rails and then a bunch of trees and the 4 rails and the,
Oh.
do you know what I'm saying?
And they're kind of
I don't know, but
patchwork.
I think the continuous ones are better, but then a definition of turning something into a private gated community comes up
Yeah.
and stuff like that. I just,
Personally, I
Maybe
hate
we-
fences because they just deteriorate so.
Maybe we just take the fencing
do it as
one
berms.
out. Yeah,
Berms.
do the other stuff. but not-
trees.
Well, look at the, those pictures look
Landscape.
nice.
They do.
Yeah,
They
so I
look
think,
nice when they're new.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
The
I
ones,
suppose,
the
yeah.
ones along Weaver Lake Road and the other one, another place, but the
We
ones,
ran in-
the ones along Weaver Lake, that HOA is truly taking care of those. They're doing a good job.
we ran into this issue in M and I and Bass Lake Road, M and I on the north side.
Okay.
We pushed them back off 10. We
Gotcha.
thought, and they had the road wasn't straight and aligned, because they,
Yes.
I don't know if it makes a difference. It seems to make a difference, but I like how they did it.
Where was that?
M and I, north
The-
of Bass Lake Road, yeah.
Crossings out, or Bass Lake Crossings.
Oh, the new one over
The
here.
north one.
Gotcha.
We're talking about original reserve.
Because they've got a big
Remember
berm
that?
that separates the neighborhood from,
Yeah,
Because, yeah.
it could be worse.
and there's that big sandstone wall that's never gonna wear out. I mean, you could certainly,
So you're
Yeah.
saying you
That
like, you like how Bass Lake Crossing is off, I'm sorry, what exactly is it that you like about it?
It's an
It's an effective
example
buffer.
of when,
Of the buffer,
when,
yeah.
yeah, in theory, they could have put it 20 feet off the road, but we pushed it back and had the road
True.
just be slightly different. I
Yeah,
think it
we
made
were
it,
concerned about the
Okay.
ability for people to.
See
think
around
That they were
that.
going, that they were on the 2 roads running.
Yeah, that's true
There's the
too,
2
yeah.
roads running parallel that we were concerned with.
And that's a
people-
unique circumstance because of
Yeah,
how
it doesn't happen
poorly
often,
aligned
but-
stuff is over there.
2D1, percent of units within 1,000 feet walk from a park.
on 2C3 interior perimeter roads, I thought it was important to not have them be parallel. And we could this is all about codification rather than,
Okay.
Yeah, I like that one as well. Keeps it
Okay.
a little less monotonous.
I would support that.
I just heard you take it.
Percent of units within 1,000 feet of a park, 2D1. And along with that, 2D3.
we'd have to come up with a percentage.
And
Or different points as the percentage goes up, but yeah, we would kind of have.
Are we talking about points or requirements then? I thought we were talking about making
It's been a
these,
mix of what I'm getting, but yeah,
required.
we're talking,
been a-
I
yeah,
feel like
bit of
we're
a mix.
talking about what benefits that we would be interested in a point system, and then I've been making notes as you've been saying, that would be a must, no extra points. So I
okay.
can be both. So I think we can codify some of this, and then
Yep.
we could have points
see.
and stuff we're a little more flexible about.
I think in the next round, when we bring this back, we can talk about what goes into code versus what would be in the point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're probably not gonna like the first draft, but that's okay. You guys can let me know how I need to fix it. I'm probably gonna throw out random numbers and you guys can.
Well, we like what you've done so far.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.
Can't speak for Alan, but the rest of us are.
And I did speak with Alan
Just give it a brief.
before the meeting tonight, and generally, he likes some of the flexibility for PUDs, just based on our current underlying zoning, like we've talked about, so it's just
Gotcha.
some flexibility for when it's needed, but
Is he coming to the regular meeting?
he is
No,
not
not
able to
tonight.
make it, no. He you will see him on Tuesday night at Night to Night. So he will be there at Night to Night and the next meeting. He apologized for not being here. Vacations and sports. Kids.
Sounds good.
Fair enough.
So internal trail connections, this one I read as just having private trails that would connect to things, which I would see as a benefit.
Do we want to make them private trails?
Well, I don't think it specifies that it has to be
Part
private,
of-
but the more that they build.
Again,
the better.
private trails are a benefit because we don't have to upkeep them.
Right.
They would be
But they'll
public.
still get used.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they'd be
exactly.
public in that they wouldn't be like you couldn't go to them.
Right, as long as we don't do, as long as it's not a gated community, and that could be something that we clarify.
Okay.
This is not supposed to be for gated
All right.
communities.
Yeah. 2D4 pedestrian scale and ornamental street lighting. Is this already a requirement?
Say it again,
For
I'm
us?
sorry.
2D4 pedestrian
Street
scale and ornamental street lighting.
So we, from a street lighting perspective, Wright Hennepin and Excel give us specs and that's what they put in. So we're somewhat limited, I believe.
I think we'd have to like, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we wanted to do something else, we'd have to like develop and actually procure our own light and somehow get that approved. They only really
Oh.
offer 1 or 2 lights now. They
Okay.
used to offer more, they've shrunk it back, so I think we'd have to go through a process to like literally purchase our own
That's probably not worth it.
Find out where they,
Okay.
Let's give you guys something else.
thank you.
So we're gonna skip that?
I think so.
I think so.
2D6, sorry, no, that is a typo. So 2D6 cul-de-sacs are open-ended that basically they connect to trails if there are trails back there.
That was, okay. That is what it's saying. I misunderstood that one.
Yeah, it isn't super clear until you see the picture, what they're talking about.
Yep. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Well, are you talking about having it be codified? It has to be, or are you talking about points?
Points for that one, I would think. I mean.
I mean, if there's a trail there, maybe you do make it a requirement.
Might be pretty hard to make it every single
Yeah.
cul-de-sac goes into a.
Probably.
It'll depend on where the trails are. But if there's a trail back there, I would think you'd want to connect it.
And that could be part of the negotiation too. So having it as a benefit we'd like to see, I think would help set that expectation. But I think to Councilor Bottom's point is it might not always make sense.
The 2E1 park dedication in strict conformance to the comprehensive park systems plan, that should be a requirement, right? I think it
Fair
is, so.
Yeah.
So I value it, but we shouldn't have it be worth points.
Okay.
2E2 open space is consolidated and usable.
Definitely.
That should probably be a requirement in developments that have open spaces.
So
Yeah, it's
for low
unusable.
density,
No, I can't use
Say
it.
that again, sorry.
Are we saying a requirement for low density PUDs? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the rest of them would be a benefit or a point benefit, or what do you think?
Well, this is open spaces being consolidated, not that there are open spaces, and we probably should talk about that too. But if
there's
there,
open space, it should be consolidated.
yeah,
Gotcha.
It, whether it be OS&P or MUSA, it should be required for all of it, shouldn't it? Like, there should be no delineation,
Yeah, so the,
even though you don't get extra stuff.
yeah, OS&P, you are allowed to have 2 spots, but you, like, the open space, you can't have more than 2 separate parcels, basically, that count for that open space. So that's kind of how you deal with the consolidation there. I don't think we have much that would really set that requirement without doing something like this. so.
Can I ask a question, sort of sidebar?
Yeah.
OS&P, is there still a triple bonus?
It's a double bonus.
But we got rid of the triple bonus, didn't we?
I believe so. I believe there used to be
Yes,
something
I
more
just
than
wanted to make sure.
200, and it's gone. So the
Yeah.
most you can do is
That's good.
twice the development
Okay,
rate.
good. I was gonna ask you to address that, but since it's already been addressed. All right,
2E3 open spaces are connected with green natural corridors.
wouldn't that already be in 2E2 already?
No, because corridors are a little different. Corridors are kind of like the right-of-way can be, if it's done right, can be a green corridor. The open space, I think, is a bit different in that it's a large open area where corridors can be like 10 feet in space that kind of connects it to another area.
I
Okay.
guess it depends how strictly we're interpreting the open space being consolidated. If we're saying it has to be one consolidated area, then there really wouldn't be green corridors to connect anything to.
Right, so maybe if it doesn't make sense to consolidate it, that would be a way, again, so maybe that's why it makes sense on a point system, because if they can't consolidate it, but it's connected in a green corridor fashion.
Okay.
Then that might make sense. So it kind of allows some flexibility in what that open space looks like.
Works.
2E5, natural features are retained.
Yeah, I feel like that's what we talked
We already
about.
covered the next one, wetlands are retained, not mitigated, as being a requirement.
One question I would have on 2E5 is how do we measure that? What's unique? And what is the definition? Definitions are going to be critical on that one.
So we do have that natural resources map that you hate, that's.
Well, not every hilltop's on that, not every ravine is on that.
No, that's true, it doesn't,
Probably,
we would probably have to see, I don't know how doable it would be to get a map on like steep slopes.
you could run some stuff and get close on
You could get close.
GIS now, it's
Okay, so
way
we
more
could
advanced.
probably get some kind of map to.
That's kind of where,
understand what's there.
most of the things here we can measure, that would be a tough thing.
Yeah.
Can't codify something you can't measure.
Fair enough, yeah, I think we'd have to find like what's the starting point
Okay.
on the site, and then what are we retaining?
Or even a survey, if they want to go through that effort to do a natural survey.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
And have some sort of opinion, and then it could be evaluated too.
This one seems to be missing from the paper packet, but there's a 2E10, I think, on the digital packet for extensive internal landscaping.
Okay,
2E3, can I,
Yeah, go ahead.
could we codify public accessibility to creeks, streams, ponds, lakes? I'm open, I don't know if we should or not, but
public access to,
creeks, streams, ponds,
Creek.
lake, et cetera.
streams.
Which one did you just
I
say?
guess I
2E7.
don't know why they'd award points
There you
to
go.
that. And I don't know why, I guess I'd,
2E7, okay. I thought you said
but,
We could look at that. I'm trying to think of a time where that wouldn't make sense, but as someone who really went to school for environmental policy, I love the idea of keeping water open to the public. So I think I don't see anything wrong with that off the bat.
Yeah. And if they have one in the PUD, just a requirement they have to do.
yeah, then they couldn't say, well, we should be able to have 25-foot lots because we're going to open the
Right.
water to other people to use it.
Yeah, that's a good
I would like to look at making that a requirement.
Okay, and again, we're talking about requirement in the PUD?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
Wait, the requirement outside the PUD.
We'll get there. I think right now we gotta focus on this, but yeah, we can definitely make that, and then we could.
When I say required, I talk about required outside PUDs.
Okay,
Should have for every zoning district.
We can put it in the PUD first, and then we can update the rest of it.
yeah, I think that's gonna be the.
You guys had this discussion already, right?
I think so.
Yeah, and I was thinking that this was all rewrite the code activity.
I think that's gonna
Partially
be a
is.
2023 project.
Fair enough.
That's just a.
Now we at least, we can take our PUD requirements and then, like you said at the beginning, I think,
Build
is
off that.
make them. But when I say code, I mean actual code.
Okay, well, just so you know, when you're saying code, I'm writing it down as we're gonna put it as a strict standard in the PUD.
Yeah,
And that can be a starting point, and then when
that's
we're-
fine. Yeah, I know, yeah, you got it's the, crawl, walk, run.
Okay, yes.
2E10, extensive internal landscaping.
To me, I don't care necessarily what the internal landscaping looks like, but that's just me. I put internal not important in my notes.
Okay. I think
Less points.
it's worth points.
Yeah, I don't know if it's worth a ton of points, but I think there's some value to it.
And then, out of order, 2E9, use of native plants and landscaping so that it's drought tolerant and so on.
Natalie would probably be with me where I say you couldn't use non-native plants, and all that does is spread and we get buckthorn.
If we use non-native plants?
Yeah, people,
Okay.
neighborhoods use non-native plants, and that's how we ended up with buckthorn. It sucks, but we can't. I'm not expecting anybody else to agree with me on that.
Well, I'm right there with you,
Yeah.
second and Buckler.
Invasive, so
I
for
see,
non-native.
I see.
so
I got a whole
non-native
corner full.
plant Is a,
I'm all for native plants as much as possible. The only thing is, we have to keep in mind that, as things get hot, like this summer, it might be,
It may change what.
yeah, some things
survivable.
might, like, I know the U of M's looking at ways to keep our pine trees, and it might involve like a hybrid plant eventually. So it's gonna not be necessarily a native tree, but it's trying to retain the essential goal of the pine tree. So it might be things like being open to that, but I love the idea of native plantings, and we can go from there.
Heidi has said that Minnesota in this area used to be zone 4, but now it's zone 5, because the winters don't get as cold. So we've got to be able
Yeah.
to adapt a bit there.
Yeah, last January was super warm.
And I personally don't want Minnesota to turn into just a complete prairie. So anything we can do, if that means making slightly different trees or something, I'm for it. 'Cause I would love to keep our like wooded landscape, especially north. So I know there's a lot of things they're looking at doing to try to keep whatever plants we can and make hybrids of others. So things will change.
2E11, existing structures retained to reuse. This is the silo.
Absolutely.
Ordinance.
Absolutely.
It's like Fantasyland, there aren't that many of these left.
I know, but
Dean's barn has to be used.
I got a silo.
I got a barn.
Full of pigeons.
I got a 100-year-old barn too.
So I'm hearing
right
that a
there with-
silo would be about 100 points.
I think so.
And it could be a visual termini and,
Does it actually say Jonathan on that silo?
Yeah, I think it does say Jonathan.
So Maple Grove wanted silos, that's good to know.
there you go.
2E12,
And with that,
viable open space master plan is created.
okay.
And same for 13, natural restoration work. And 14, extraordinary environmental protection.
Isn't it something that would already be?
It's saying
It's gotten horrible.
for unregulated, so areas that there isn't a protection on. But it would be,
Above and beyond, I guess.
Yeah.
They say
Yes,
we're gonna, there are some builders that actually do that kind of stuff.
right.
maybe like an open space preservation where you put it in an easement with the HOA or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay.
2E15, area of parkland, woodland, or other open space above the minimum.
Yep.
Let's make that one a requirement, how about that?
Okay, so area of parkland, woodland, or other open space.
How do you require?
Well,
it
if you
to be
make it a
above the
requirement, then it's
Yeah.
not, then it's the minimum.
Right. Just a never-ending cycle.
Okay, we want that to be a requirement, is what I'm hearing, or?
No, I don't think we could make it a requirement.
Okay, so
How could we
most-
require
Talk about
above the
having
minimum?
an open space
Okay.
minimum for low density. Do we want to have that as a requirement?
That would be a cluster PUD, would they usually have that, and then we can put in there that townhomes would not be something, I know we kind of talked about the 4/5 majority, so I don't know if we want to make that for all PUDs, or if that's more of, like, when we're talking about changing a use with the 4/5, or if we're saying no change in uses.
I'm open to either of those scenarios.
Couldn't you have them both?
4/5.
You could have change of use as a 4/5 and,
Well, there would be
I
no
think if we
point in
did
calling
any-
it out
if we did any-
for-
yeah, because
It
if you
would apply to
change,
all.
if you change a use,
Well,
Then-
so keep in mind PUDs are a zoning district, so to change, I think it depends on what use we're talking about. But if we're talking about rezoning a property from residential to commercial or industrial, that's when the 4/5 vote comes in. So I think it's kind of a similar idea, I think, if when we're talking, but it's not really, we don't use that when we're rezoning from a residential to residential.
If we required it for all PUDs, we wouldn't need to also specifically require it for a
For changing.
change
that
that
was
would
yeah,
already
that was my
apply.
point. So when do we want the 4/5 vote, is basically.
So the
question.
4/5 would include,
Either, well, so I think the two options are for all PUD plans, if we're to approve a PUD, needs 4/5, or if it's the change in housing type or
Use.
use.
yeah, okay.
So
Maybe we should do a quick hand raise if who's interested in each of the options. And maybe it's
I'd
okay
be in
if you vote.
favor of doing it for all PUDs.
So we've been talking about like industrial PUDs,
All.
or are we talking about low-density PUDs?
I would say all low-density PUDs.
But you
I don't-
wouldn't be in favor of it for industrial or commercial?
I'm not opposed to it necessarily. I guess we haven't had the experience to know.
And why not mixed residential?
Yeah. So we could just do it for
Residential
all
PUDs.
residential PUDs?
I don't know why you wouldn't do a 4/5 on all of them,
I'm fine with that.
I would do that.
all
too.
PUDs.
All PUDs?
All PUDs.
That would change things dramatically.
Yep.
It's also gonna stop people from developing here. Just be prepared for that. It'll slow things
It'll
down.
slow things down, yes.
It may. I mean, it depends on what the economics of the development would be.
Well, annualized residential construction went down in the last quarter 86%. I read today. So like, it's slowing down, whether we want to change the
Right.
code or not.
I mean, the last couple
Like
years
some,
have been insane.
yes, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think all PUDs.
Okay, I have that noted.
Kenny?
Thank you all.
Is there anything else? Any other ones you had, Jeremy, on that, the rest of that list?
Probably not worth discussing, no.
Sounds good.
May I,
Yes.
the unit scale criteria?
Unit scale, which page?
Is there a way to, to disallow like some of these?
Okay, can you give me a page number you're looking at?
22?
Yeah, let's do it.
Unit scale criteria. I must be looking at the wrong one.
Yeah, I would think so.
If we're gonna have a requirement that there be 6,
Yes, okay.
then I think you could get rid of the first 3, like the 2, the 5, and the 10 pattern, pretty easily.
Oh, I see, okay. So you want to get rid of the first 3?
If we already have the requirement on the
Well-
6.
Gotcha.
I guess it doesn't necessarily mean that, but it would be easy-ish to do if you have 6.
If we have a requirement for 6 already, then these things kind of become irrelevant, don't
Yeah,
they?
we don't
They
necessarily.
should, I mean, I guess it doesn't require that they, just because they have those 6 different, that doesn't mean that they're not gonna put them
All in a
all
row.
together, right?
We do have a restriction on houses of identical design adjacent to each other, don't we? Or is
Was that part of the PUDs, or is that part of district guidelines?
So I would have to look at it. I know so our underlying district for single-family residential has significant architectural standards to begin with. And so there's certain, it's like, I don't know if it's, whether or not it's the same. I'd have to look at it more
Okay,
closely.
maybe that's a discussion point to have when this comes back to us. Okay,
Okay.
anything else big? Covered a lot in the last half hour there after
Holy mackerel.
stumbling for an hour. Good job, Jeremy.
Thank you. Move to adjourn.
Second.
Perfect. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you.
That was a speed round.
That was.
It's to you and the whole group. Commissioner office does have someone else.
I've been out, kids didn't have daycare.
So I had
I left the pool and,
speak.
taking them out of the
I got a
house.
confirmation on today that they like to.
5 and 2 and a
So
half.
we do have a presentation and that's where I know.
I'm gonna call for a vote that they can't do it.
Who is it?
Month.
So that is something that I just have not gotten.
In January, and I was like, I don't even want to talk about this. That makes me sense. You're way too close.
Second here.
Yeah.
who was
Jess, is it turned off?
Oh,
3.
I knew you were gonna say something like that.
He was 5.